Welcome to Larkin-Gowan Insights, accountancy and business advice for all, a series that gives you bite-sized tips and guidance on tax, funding, legislation, reforms and much more. With case studies, business advisory and sector specials and even interviews, our team of experts are committed to helping you navigate the world of accounting and finance with a variety of presenters from across our specialisms. So, let's get on with today's show.
Thank you for joining us, and we welcome you to the Larkin-Gowan podcast discussing what the main political parties have proposed for their election manifestos for 2024. So my name's Gilly McGill. I'm a VAT director here at Larkin-Gowan, and I'm joined by my colleagues Giles Kerkham.
Hi, I head up our charities and education team.
And Dominic Carter.
Hello, I'm partner in our business tax advisory team.
If we start first of all with some of the common ground that's particularly present within the manifestos of the two main parties, the Conservative Party and Labour Party, it's notable that they have both tied themselves into some promises to have no rises in income tax, corporation tax, VAT, although more on that later, or national insurance contributions. They've also both said that they're going to raise a large amount, something in the order, I think, Dominic, of £5 billion through addressing the tax gap and tackling tax avoidance. So what have they said about that, Dominic?
Yes, all three parties have suggested they will be able to raise somewhere between £5 billion and £7 billion. And in some cases, acknowledging there will be costs of raising those revenues as well. But that's the sort of quantum. The tax gap is HMRC's expression. That is their best estimate of the difference between the total amount of taxes they believe should be collected in a perfectly compliant society and the actual amount of taxes that are raised. Tax avoidance, when the parties refer to that, is a slightly sloppy shorthand for the tax gap. The amount which HMRC predict is lost to tax avoidance is around £1.4 billion. So what they really mean is they'll take action to address the tax gap overall. And the tax gap overall includes larger elements such as about £11 billion, which are actually lost through tax evasion and the hidden economy. So deliberate efforts to criminally avoid paying tax, including, for example, the understatement of income and not registering for certain taxes, as well as more glamorous ways of trying to evade tax. That's criminal activity. Tax avoidance, as we know, is somewhat different from that, but is generally not something which is thought favourably of, and substantial efforts have been undertaken over the last probably couple of decades to reduce that amount so far as possible. But the biggest
Dominic, can I just come in? This is in the context of about 800 billion annual tax take? Am I right?
Yeah, those are. So the amount which is lost as a result of the tax gap is around about 5% of potential total taxes based on estimates. The biggest element of it is 16 billion or so, which HMRC think is lost due to error and mistake. So this isn't anything with regards to evasion or avoidance, but it's amounts where taxpayers haven't paid the right amount through mistakes that they've made.
So are these parties suggesting they might invest in HMRC to achieve this?
Absolutely. The sort of investment that they all refer to are things such as enhanced use of technology, including artificial intelligence, investing in the HMRC's system, Connect system, which is a powerful piece of IT infrastructure they've got for addressing tax evasion, and also investing in the people at HMRC so that they're better resourced and can undertake more compliance activities.
Well, that would be very welcome, I would think.
Can we get better service? Yeah,
most of our clients have had lots of problems with HMRC's lack of service in the past years.
Yeah, and I think as accountants and tax advisors, that would be one area which we would be very positive about. We would like to see better guidance from HMRC, better support in terms of helplines, which they've shown a keenness to reduce, and probably also, this is probably the more ambitious idea, but some simplification to an incredibly complex tax system. I mean, there's no doubt many errors and mistakes are committed due to the complexity of the tax system when you think about the sort of taxpayers who are having to deal with it, sole traders, small businesses. So the greatest part of that tax gap is attributable to error and mistake.
And I think I'm right in saying that most of the analyses accept that the largest part of society that is not paying the right amount of tax is those smaller businesses that you've mentioned, Dominic. So interestingly, none of the parties have mentioned that fact, which may perhaps give the impression that most of the gap is with the larger corporates that, grab headlines for tax avoidance, etc. Something else that none of the parties have particularly mentioned is the voluntary sector, Giles, which I know is one that sits close to your heart. So what have you been hearing that the voluntary sector and charities want from a new government that isn't being addressed?
I mean, this is the question. What do we want rather than what they're offering? What we want has been fairly consistent for as long as I've been involved in charities. I think what they want a partnership. They want to be involved in policy making, because they've got expertise. They're on the ground. They're the nearest to the service users. They have expertise, and they want their voices to be heard. It does come down to money as well, and they want sustainable funding. They want settlements over a number of years.
So I think what you're saying, Giles, is that the voluntary sector wants a new government to provide stability for them, certainty, and to consult with them on plans.
They need multi-year sustainable settlements, both from central government and from local government and NHS and other funding sources to enable them to plan and operate properly. But just taking that back a step, in the first place, they need access to government contracts. Regardless of size, they should have a fair opportunity to contribute to public services, because they do have unique insights and they have unique capabilities. And if government takes a shortcut and cuts its admin costs by saying we will only allow entities over a certain size to tender, then it chops out the ability of local charities to contribute. Before we move on, I just do want to say that charities have a valid role speaking up in support of those in need. I think you and I have seen government looking to close down charities who are campaigning in certain ways where that is critical of government. And charities cannot be political. There is good, clear Charity Commission guidance on where the line is. And particularly in an election period, they need to be careful. But it is valid that they campaign. A wildlife charity should be able to campaign for the protection of wildlife, etc., etc. So we just hope that a new government gives that, just protects those.
It's about the social impact, isn't it? So those charities in the charitable sector do have really strong, impactful, positive benefits to their local and, in some cases, national beneficiaries. Before we move away from social impact, perhaps we should turn to talk about education for a minute, Giles. What have we got on education in the manifesto?
And where the manifestos are, as a rule, rather thin in talking about voluntary sector and charities specifically, all of them show strong programs for education.
Mm-hmm.
And if we start with state education, Conservatives say they talk about their programme and what they've done to date and moving forward. So they will expand what they call strong academy trusts. They are emphasising that they will protect the rights of independent and grammar schools, and they'll lift a cap on faith schools. Labour Party, as you'd expect, are just as passionate, but they have a different slant. Their first step is well publicised, to recruit 6,500 more teachers in specialised subjects. We have a lot of Academy Trust clients. when we talk to them, they have two really key worries at the moment. One is the finances. The other is in terms of recruitment of people, recruitment and retention. So it's got to be positive that they're looking to expand the number of teachers. Taking it's wider than just academy schools and teachers, though. Just looking at early years, Labour are looking to, they say that they will provide free breakfast clubs for everyone in primary schools. They will also open an additional 3,000 nurseries through upgrading space in primary schools. All the manifestos, they recognise that there's a real problem in the SEN sector, the special educational needs sector. So Conservatives say they will transform education for children with special educational needs by delivering 60,000 more school places. That's a lot. And further 15 new free schools for children with special educational needs. Labour say they'll take a community-wide approach by increasing inclusivity and expertise in mainstream schools, but also for special schools to cater for those who can't access mainstream, those with the most complex needs. Also, both Labour and Conservative talk quite a lot about FE, further education. Okay. So moving forward to the sort of 16 plus and skills. For Conservatives, that's creating 100,000 more apprenticeships every year by the end of the Parliament. They say they will fund this, and we've heard this by closing university courses which have excessive dropout rates or leave students worse off in terms of job prospects.
And we've seen some headlines around that strapline, haven't we?
Yeah. Labour say they guarantee training and or apprenticeship or help to find work for all 18 to 21-year-olds, which is a new commitment.
Yeah.
They also talk about establishing a programme called Skills England, which brings businesses and training providers and unions and government together. There will be devolution of skills funding to combined authorities as well. So that is an area, skills, which is going to see lots and lots of development, and we'll see how that turns out.
Lots of jockeying for position, I can see.
Yes, yeah.
It sounds like both of the main parties are looking to invest heavily in education, which is great, but we need to think a little bit about where that money is coming from.
Well, before they're looking to make significant developments. There will be the degree of development of investment is there to be seen. But I think you're about to talk about an extra £2 million. What's going to fund the extra 6,500 teachers for Labour? It's
VAT on independent school fees.
Yep.
My pet topic of the moment, which is the Labour manifesto proposal to apply VAT to independent school fees. We're not going to talk at length in this particular episode on that topic. And if that is something that people want to hear more about, then we have a podcast on our platforms that talks about solely that particular topic, as well as some useful information on the Larking Gown website. So do check those out if they are relevant to you. But as well as VAT on school fees, as I say, grabbing the headlines disproportionately, some might say, when you consider the amount of tax that proposal is thought to raise, more in the millions of pounds rather than billions of pounds that the tax gap measures Dominic's touched on look to raise. Also, schools or independent schools will have their rates relief removed, which, Giles, you and I have mused on in the past as to whether actually that's a bigger challenge for our schools than the VAT.
In the government statistics, the biggest tax relief for charities, bigger than gift aid even, is business rates relief. Whether or not that's going to, but it's all clouded in mystery and uncertainty, rather like some of VAT, I think.
Yeah.
But we see some calculations of what the VAT benefit will be. We don't see much on the business rates relief, which is going to be more important in the context of an individual school. I thought it's very much going to depend on the school. A school that sits in a metropolitan area, sitting on very high value land, is going to have high value rates. It's going to depend on the amount of fees as well. I think it's going to be some and some.
Yeah, agreed. And also on business rates, we've had a suggestion in the Labour manifesto that they will look to replace the regime with some measures which will also seek to tax online businesses. So that's a massive departure from what we've had to date. Seems to me rather a big leap to try to implement, but as you say, with everything thus far, no draft legislation obviously for us to look at, and really precious little detail for us. So quite a lot of investment, quite a lot of spending being mentioned. Turning then to some more of the possible revenue raising measures, Dominic, one of the other big potential tax bringers would be changes that both Conservatives and Labour have proposed for the non-domiciled regime. Can you enlighten us a bit about what that may or may not look like?
Yeah, that's a very good point, what it may or may not look like, because in keeping with other things, there is no draft legislation. As you say, this is a major revenue-raising measure as far as the Labour Party are concerned, at least, and they think it's going to help them raise £5 billion plus. So a similar order to the amount of revenue they think would be raised through their closing the tax gap measures. Personally, I get excited about things like this because the regime for non-domiciled individuals has been in place for the best part of 2 centuries and substantially unchanged for the best part of a century or so. But I think it is really big news. It was Labour's policy, and then, as we know, at this year's budget, the Conservatives announced that they were also removing non-domiciled status. It should be coming quite soon, which again is scary given lack of legislation. Both parties have said that they will abolish non-dom status with effect from 6th of April next year. So it's coming soon, and that's
really very short amount of time if anybody has got to make some changes to their circumstances to incorporate those changes.
It absolutely is, and some of the changes that you might envisage might be, well, at the moment, what does the non-domiciled status mean? What it really means is that for individuals who do have an overseas domicile of origin and haven't settled permanently in the UK, and thereby having acquired a UK domicile of choice, they are in principle subject to UK tax on UK income and gains, and only subject to UK income tax and capital gains tax in respect of overseas income and gains to the extent that they are remitted or brought into the UK. Now, there have been changes to the rules which have narrowed the scope of that and introduced a charge that has to be paid, the remittance basis charge. But in principle, that's a part of it. Another part of it is what happens in terms of inheritance tax. Where again you have different rules, but the concept is that the full worldwide estate isn't brought into scope of UK inheritance tax, subject to again some specific rules on that around deemed domicile. And last but not least, wealthy offshore individuals, non-doms, will often create trusts to keep that overseas wealth outside of the UK. And these are people who pay a large amount of tax in the UK, notwithstanding that they are, have or are able to benefit from these type of rules. Now, of course, it's not going to be abolished and nothing put in its place, because that wouldn't facilitate people being internationally mobile, coming to the UK, and it wouldn't allow the UK to keep hold of taxes, which was the original reason for the domicile regime. It was back in the days of the British Empire, and the British government didn't want to see people move overseas and depart the UK tax net. So what you're probably going to have from the parties is some form of regime where there's some sheltering of income and gains, overseas income and gains from UK tax for a very time limited period when they come into the UK. And similarly, on exiting the UK, there will be some sort of transitional regime there that will retain those taxes within scope to UK taxes. As you say, no draft legislation. We don't really know what the measures will involve. Probably the case that Labour's measures will be harder edged, and again, they need to make them so in order to be able to justify the sort of amounts that they say they will raise. But in these cases, there is always the question of, will the taxpayers involved change their behaviours? Will non-DOMs currently in the UK depart the UK, such that they won't be paying any taxes at all? And how will it affect people moving to the UK in the first place if there isn't a regime there? If there's a regime that means they're fully exposed to UK tax on income and gains wherever they are in the world from the moment they enter the UK. So those latter issues are all political issues that will have to be worked through if either of the parties is going to achieve substantial increase in tax yields as a result of these policies.
Thank you. So we've got the possibility, as we look ahead to the general election on the 4th of July, of a sea change perhaps in the government or not. But either way, from what you're saying, Dominic, there will be likely changes for non-domiciles to think about and get their heads around before April 2025. So lots for them to think about. So on that note, thank you for joining us, those who've tuned in. If you do have any questions for any of us, please get in touch, or with your usual Larkin-Gowan contacts. Links will be in the show notes for you. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us for Larkin-Gowan Insights, Accountancy and Business Advice for All. Don't forget, you can find more information about today's topic and more about how our team of experts can help you in your business by visiting our website, larkin-gowan.co.uk. Join us again next time for another fascinating insight into the world of accounting and finance.